With me here in studio is John Paul Gonzalez, our speaker from last week, who spoke to the entire population of Walnut Grove as well as the 8th graders from Rogers Middle School, and he spoke to us about the message of all in. So what does that mean to you? How did you come up with this philosophy?
Shaarika, I think for me, I feel it's something that's a lifestyle. I think it's something that all of us have the opportunity to live, every day and every moment. By it coming about, it did get popularized by working with the New York Giants, speaking to them, the night before Christmas Eve during their season and, kind of challenging them. What does all in look like for them? And I'll be honest, I did not talk to them about football. I've worked with the team for 9 seasons. I never mention football when I speak to the team the night before games because, they're going to know more about football, how to try to beat Dak Prescott or, the teams they're playing the next day. But, I did challenge them, as men, what does it look like to be committed? What does it look like to give your best? It was a chapel service, so it was from the Bible. And I just really challenged them and saying, what would it look like to not go halfway? Most people, they go up to the point of convenience. Well, if I'm on my way anyway, I'll stop by. If I'm going to be there anyway, okay, I'll give it a shot. But I've really challenged them, what does it look like to, be dedicated? Win or lose? Pass or fail?
Yeah.
I'm going to give my best in this situation, whether it's for 5 minutes or for 50 minutes. I'm going to be all there. And that's something I challenge them with. And I feel that's an opportunity that is not just about athletics or about our profession. It's in our personal lives. It's in our relationships with each other. It's, how we conduct a conversation. I think we've all had the experience of maybe being at a party or a function and you're talking to someone and they're always you can tell their eyes are looking over your shoulder. Yeah. It's kind of well, do you want to talk to me or trying to talk to somebody else? I think sometimes the power of just being fully there. And sometimes you say, well, I can't really be all in. I don't have enough time. And I think sometimes that can be a little bit of an excuse because I think it's whatever time you do have. If I got 5 minutes, put the phone down, hey, let's talk for 5 minutes. If it's 15 minutes, hey, let's be all there for 15 minutes. And sometimes those 15 minutes are more powerful than if we were kind of divided in our attention for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what all in kind of means to be is being where your feet are and choosing to be all there. If you're in practice, you're in practice. Yes, you have a test the next day. You being worried about the test in practice is not going to change the test the next day, right? You're here in practice with your teammates, be all there. Let's get them better. Let's get our team better. The test will come when the test comes. Same thing if you're in class and, you have a performance on stage, you're nervous about it. It's okay to be nervous. It means you care. But, you being nervous in algebra doesn't change the fact of how you're going to, perform later on. Be fully there in algebra, fully attentive, fully present, and then it'll happen when it happens.
Yeah. So you mentioned speaking with the New York Giants, and you've spoken to a lot of other teams, and you mentioned 7-Eleven executives.
Yeah.
So what makes you want to go out to all of these people and especially us? We're just at high school in the middle of Prosper. Why us?
I think personally, I'm biased. Come from my background as a 9th grade world history teacher. I do enjoy being with students more than adults. I'm just going to be honest with you there. That's what makes me come alive. That's what I feel my purpose is. But I think it's interesting. Growing up, if you were to tell me I was speaking to groups, I would just say no way. Just being very, very honest with you. In 7th grade, I hated speaking in public. Absolutely hated it. So much so that I had a science fair. The science fair, you have those trifold cardboard.
Yeah. You
stand in the gym on one of the tables and you explain you did some science project that's it's basic, but all the reasons it's the scientific method and all that stuff. And I remember I was so scared to present my science project in the 7th grade that part of the science project was heating up a balloon through water in a bottle that I burned myself on purpose. So I didn't have to do the science fair project.
Oh.
And I didn't have to do it at the moment, but then later on I told my mom about it, what I did, and after that, she made me be in every school play after that. So it didn't necessarily work the way I wanted, but I started getting confidence being out there and speaking in public more. But I started also finding when I spoke about stuff I cared about, I could talk for hours.
Yeah.
So if you ask me to talk to you about, the economics of, pre-industrial England, I'm not going to be so great at it. But if I could take that subject and find a way to relate it to something I do care about, the way young adults and youth were being treated in the child labor system of pre-industrial England, now I have something I can talk about because that's relating to something I care about.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, when it's speaking to others, I really try to take time and say, how can I relate? How can I truly empathize? I know we throw the word empathy around a lot, but it takes some time to truly empathize of, you know what, there's things, you might have some anxiety about. I don't currently have anxiety about, but it might take me about 5 or 10 minutes to be like, you know what, I can remember that feeling of anxiety and that anxiety I feel before we take the field with the Giants and it's a big game. And okay, that's a similar feeling to the way you may feel about, applying to law school in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay, now I can empathize with you. It's the same anxiety, it's for different occasions, but I find out when I can take time to empathize, whether the group is executives from General Motors to Walmart to 7-Eleven, or as awesome as being with students here at Walnut Grove, that's something that I think is something I never want to be able to lose. And I think it's, sometimes I get mad at myself for being nervous, like, driving over here, I was scared, I was still nervous, but I think I've learned that being nervous means you care.
Yeah.
The things I've regretted most of my life are the times I came in overconfident. And not to the point of nervous where, you're throwing up in the bathroom, you can't come out it, but nerves give you a focus. Fear, there's a degree of fear that helps you focus in a way nothing else does. And I think that focus is essential because it can help you make split-second decisions when you're in the middle of something, because that fear has given you a focus that confidence doesn't give you. So it's kind of that focus of saying, oh, okay, can I pivot this way, and would this story work better? I wasn't planning on telling this story, but let me pivot and see, I think this will resonate better with this group. Or, with executives talking about, this degree of what they want to do in profitability, let me shift and actually talk about this principle.
Yeah.
But you don't know that going in. You might have this script going in. You want to stick to your script for the most part, but at the same time, that fear, that nerves, if you will, is healthy enough to give you that focus, and all of a sudden people are like, wow, man, you were like speaking right to me. But that only happened by, one, being nervous means you care, and two, having that degree of focus that only comes from having a little bit of fear in what you're doing.
Yeah, okay. So you had a little leadership conference with a lot of people, and one of the things you mentioned was like be a shark, and you gave us all shark teeth. Yeah. So can you expand a bit on that?
Yeah. So my grandfather, coming from Cuba, fortunately he was put in political prison for quite some time, and that was his favorite animal, and turned out to be my dad's favorite animal. And I never totally understood why until I started studying them. And based on the trauma they had went through and the difficulties they had come through, they'd always talk about, shark is awesome, be a shark, all that stuff. And one of the things I realized is a shark, as you know when you study biology, is the number one predator in the ocean. It's an apex predator. But it also is one of those keystone mammals that kind of holds the whole ecosystem together. It holds it. And what's interesting is the thing that allows it to do all of that are its teeth. Technically they're called scales, but it's their teeth. And the interesting thing about a shark is its teeth are not held in by cement or indestructible. They're actually held in by cartilage, like a soft tissue. And so every time a shark bites something, many times the teeth will actually fall out of their mouth. And at first glance, you could say, well, how can you be number one if you're losing your main weapon? That's kind of self-defeating. You probably, weren't created the right way. But the amazing thing is, shark doesn't have one row of teeth like we do. It has 5 to 7 rows of teeth in its mouth at just about any given time. So every time it loses a tooth, another one replaces it within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, it's just such a beautiful story of resiliency, in that the thing that rules the oceans as the apex predator is not perfect. It's tenacious, and it knows it's going to lose teeth. But even though it loses teeth, and its brains are small, it has one of the smallest brains. Octopus are smarter, dolphins are smarter, but it never forgets what it was created to be, who it was born to be. And I think sometimes we can go through challenges in life and have either we make a mistake or someone makes a mistake and it affects our lives, and we disqualify ourselves from who we're created to be. We say, and some people, they're born to be sharks, but they're walking around like tuna fish. And nothing's wrong with tuna fish, it's great for lunch, but you can tell immediately when you see someone living beneath their potential.
Yeah.
When you're like, man, I see so much more in her or in him, they just don't seem to be applying themselves, or they've reached that moment and they shrink back. And I think it's because they don't believe they're going to get another tooth, or they have those teeth but they're afraid to lose them again, so they kind of hold on to them too tightly. And so I think it's kind of that beautiful dance, if you will, of understanding, what, I'm going to lose teeth. It's not if, it's when. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm not going to say the right thing sometimes in the relationship. I'm not going to make the right play sometimes on the field. I'm not going to be great at that interview on the first time. But you know what? Just like a shark, I get another tooth in 24 hours. I get another opportunity. If I need to say sorry, I say sorry. If I need to apologize, as much as it depends on me, I want to live at peace with people. I'll apologize even if they don't. I got practice the next day. Sometimes I know the hardest things is you lose a game. When I was playing basketball in college, and last thing you want to do is go to practice the next day. Last thing. But that's the number one place you actually need to be. And so for me, I would try to jump the process by making sure I'd get in the gym at 5 a.m. It would lose a game at 9 o'clock. We'd take the long, bus ride back, and I would be in the gym the next day at 5 a.m. I was like, let me get this over with. Let me get in the gym doors, the place I don't want to be, where I experience failure, and let me just start seeing the ball go in the basket again. Let me just okay, and then you know how it is, as much as you're grumpy about it, and after 5-10 minutes with your teammates, you're like, whatever. Okay, come on, let's get on with it. And it's where you need to be, but it's just kind of having that mentality of, I'm going to lose teeth. It's not if, it's when. And when I do, guess what? I get another opportunity. I don't waste teeth. Sometimes people are like, that means you just make mistakes. You don't care what you do. You just, YOLO. Like, no, you don't do that. It's, okay, I bit there. That was a tire. You know what? Let me bit a little bit to the right. Like, sharks rarely bite in the same place twice. So it's learning from our mistakes, but then it's also saying, you get another tooth, let's try this way. Let's try that way. And I think in education, coming from being a teacher, I think that's the number one thing I tell teachers when I'm teaching in my college classes is, some days you get it right with the class. Some days you work all weekend on a lesson plan. You think it's going to be a success, and it's second period, and the kids hate it. And you're like, man, I got 8 more periods of this. How am I going to get through it? But sometimes it's like, okay. And I think the greatest things we can do sometimes in education is we come back the next day and we're honest with them and be like, hey, that lesson was kind of bad yesterday, wasn't it? Like, oh my goodness, you saw that, Mr. Gonzalez? Yeah, I was trying to be nice, but wow, that was like so, okay. Hey, let's try this way. Let's try this way to learn. And I think by us showing others that we can be that way, it almost enables them to realize there's another way to live. Yeah. It opens up a whole world of possibilities when they see someone fail, but then they see them, make corrections, not be proud of their failure, but say, I get another opportunity. All of a sudden, it wow, I could do that too. Wow, you know what? It's okay for me to try. And maybe it doesn't work out the way I planned, but I get another chance. I get another shot. And I think that's one of the things that we're most lacking in our society and culture is giving people the belief, hey, it's okay to fail. It's okay to not get it right the first time, and you're not proud of it. You don't try to fail on purpose. You get up and you try again, and sometimes I think that's the greatest way we can give hope is by showing people we're vulnerable enough to admit our failures, but we don't want to stay there. We want to try again.
And so one last thing is, how do you want to be, so you've gone out, spoken to many people, what do you want to be your legacy, or how do you want people to remember you? What do you want what do you want people to take from you and your message?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I'll put it this way, and I'm not sure if, I'm still developing it. I'll relate it back to a fear I have. And so I think when I started working, I realized I had a passion working for youth and a calling working with students. I started realizing very quickly that, hey, you enjoy doing this. This is really great. And things started happening quickly working in the jails, when we were building our youth center, and, it was so awesome. And then getting to, be in places like today, here in Walnut Grove. But I think one of the things that kind of drives me, if you talk about legacy to me now, which is different than when I was, 10 years earlier, is I never want it to be said that my daughter would come to any of the events I do, whether it's at a youth center, at a jail, or, in an awesome school like this, and should be standing next to someone and they'd be like, wow, your dad is really awesome. And she would say, really? Tell me about him, because he wasn't there for me. And I say that with with a degree of respect and the fact that I know it's got to start at home for me. Yeah. And so, I'm starting to learn that you can have all the followers you want. And trust me, I thought it was a big deal when I got verified on Twitter before you had to pay for it, and all that stuff. But then I started realizing, you can do all that, but if you're not the father you need to be to your kids, it doesn't really matter, And I don't say that flippantly. I say that just because I believe when you take care of, it's like I tell the players I work with on the Giants, when you take care of your business off the field, you actually play better on it. Yeah. And so for me, I always want to have a very soft heart for family and my faith, because I know when those are in the right place, everything else after that will happen naturally. You know, it's like when you play a sport, or, you know, when you do this awesome production like you do, you know, when you're in the zone, like, you don't have to like force it. It just happens. You're just there. People are like, wow, how are you so great at interviews, or how did you do this or do that? And you're like, I don't know. But chances are it's because some of the other things are being taken care of correctly. You're not bringing that anxiety and stress into this. And so this is able to flow as a natural outgoing of the principles and values that you've put in your place in your other life as well, you know. And so I think for me, when you talk about legacy, I just want to be a really good dad. I just really want to be a good dad. And, you know, there's this book I really enjoy. It's called The Intentional Father by John Tyson. I was talking about it before. And, you know, there's involved people. And in the book, he basically shows there's like a bunch of different roles people could play. He's like, there's involved individuals and there's intentional individuals. And he talks about how he did a number of things for his son. And when his son came back from college, he actually said, thank you, Dad, because I know all those experiences I got to have that have molded me, you were intentional about making happening. Not that you could control the outcomes. You can control the outcome if we were going to win the state championship because you put me in, you know, Little League Baseball. But you were intentional about making sure I learned what it was to keep my head up even though we lost, you know. And all those things, I know you were intentional about providing experiences for it that helped me become the man I am today. And that just really resonated with me. And the last thing I'd say regarding legacy is Bruce Springsteen is a big deal in our state. He's like this musician. I'm not a big fan of his music, but it's okay. We claim him in New Jersey as like our own. And in his biography, he has this amazing portion where he talks about after he has his first son, that his dad visits him in California. And he said his dad visits him for breakfast. And he said you know, he's kind of had a weird relationship with his dad for quite some time. And he said his dad finally says to him, he says, you know what, Bruce, like, you've been really good to us as a family with your music career and helping financially. He's like, we haven't always been the best for you. And he said he didn't, in the book he talks about, I didn't realize, was my dad apologizing? Was he not? This is kind of weird, like, what's going on? Yeah. And he said in that moment he realized two things. And I think this is something that's just stuck with me when I read it. He said, you know, we have an opportunity as parents, but also as leaders in our community, as teachers, you know, even as student leaders, we can either be ghosts or we could be ancestors. And ghosts, they haunt you. You fear them. You know, they bring up things in your past, and you want to try to avoid them at all costs. But ancestors, they give you a sense of purpose. They give you a sense of meaning. They help you make sense of the world around you. And when I read that, like, it really convicted me, because there's been times in my life I've taken past trauma went through, and I've been a ghost to people. Yeah. I've haunted them with it. I've brought up their mistakes. I brought up the ways they failed. I brought up the ways they betrayed me, or, you know, my fears of them future betraying me. I projected that onto them, like, hey, don't let me down, or this and that. And I was like, I don't want to be a ghost to my kids or to the students I get to work with. I want to be an ancestor. I want to be the type of person that when they see me, they're like, yeah, when I see Mr. Gonzalez, like, he's giving me a sense of purpose. When I see what he's doing, he might not get it right all the time. He doesn't live in the biggest apartment in town, but man, he's trying. And yeah, he tried that one thing and it didn't work out so well, or he bought that silly truck that we were supposed to try to work out on, and man, that was kind of crazy and it didn't work the way he wanted to, but man, he's trying. And it's okay to try and fail, because I see Mr. Gonzalez trying. And, you know, he doesn't get it right all the time, but he doesn't give up. Yeah. You know, and so I think, you know, when you talk about legacy, that's just what I would say, is I want to be known as someone who was a great dad and who was an ancestor, who gave people around me a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, and help them just a little bit make sense of the world around them that they live.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much.
My privilege, thank you.
Absolute honor having you here.